Hey, horse friends, I'm Becca Salamone, and you're watching American Horse Talk Live. I am so super uber excited to have on the show with me today someone very special. She is the mom of Mike Rowe. You might know who she is if I say that. She's the author of About My Mother, and her name is Peggy Rowe. Welcome to the show, Peggy. How you doing?
Thank you, Becca. Oh, this is fun. Listen, whenever I get a chance to talk about horses, I'm excited.
Yes, me too. And I'm so glad to have you here. You know, we talked for a couple of hours yesterday and worked out technology, and we finally got you on live, and we were both so thrilled that we did it. We're so proud.
That's not my strong suit, but you helped me and you were very patient.
Oh my goodness, we've already got a lot of people on the show already. So let me flash some of these up here if you don't mind for just a
Sure.
second. All right, one second. I gotta be the producer and the the talk show host. Okay, so Rebecca McKee says, "Hello, cool kids."
Oh, I'll be cool.
Yeah, and Stephanie Swain says, "Hi." Wendy Bryan, we'll try and watch. How exciting! Thanks for letting us know. Stephanie Stahl shared it. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Hey guys, if you can share it, that'd be great. All right, so that's who we have on there now. So really what I want to do is, excuse me, just start, and both, by the way, we both have colds, and so we may be coughing a little bit during this, and sorry about that. I want you to share, your history with horses, not the whole history, but how you kind of got started, and then I'll ask you some more questions about horses. So when did you first get horses into your life?
You know, I always kid that I was born loving horses because from the time I could walk, my mother said I used to gallop around the yard. Um, I never walked, I galloped. I was a horse. I think I thought I was a horse until I was about 4 years old.
I
Uh,
did the same.
Oh, okay. We lived in a neighborhood, so I didn't have access to a horse for years until I was about 10 or 11. And a couple came to our church who had a farm and horses, and they very graciously invited me to their house. And that was my first exposure to horses. I got on a cow pony named Chico, and of course, I fell in love with Chico. I rode him bareback around the paddock for about an hour that day and there was no turning back.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. So that was your first experience going bareback.
Yes, it was. In fact, I became a regular at their house and their barn. They invited me and taught me how to ride. And they had a son who was an accomplished equestrian, and he taught me. He had a thoroughbred, so. But I mean, I didn't ride with a saddle for months. That was just the way they thought it should be done.
Yeah,
And I rode a thoroughbred, and their son lunged her, and that's how I learned to post. So I would trot on the end of a lunge line with my hands crossed across in front of my chest, and
right.
he said that was best for balance. So
Really,
took his
it
word.
is.
Yeah. So yeah, I rode there for oh my 2 or 3 years.
And so, how long before your family got a farm?
I was 15 when they bought the farm. hmm they bought it mainly for my dad, who was an electrical contractor. It had a wonderful bank barn on it, and it was ideal for his business. But it also had a large chicken house, which my father, who was he could do anything with his hands. He turned it into a lovely stable, lovely four-stall stable with a wide aisle, tack room, feed room. It was lovely.
That's awesome. Excuse my clogged up throat here, y'all. I'm so sorry about that. I'm end of a cold that's about a month long. So Peggy, tell me a little bit about the horses that you've loved throughout your life, and who is your favorite horse?
Well, I just happen to have a picture here
Wow.
of my all-time favorite horse. His name was Jet because when he was born, he was black. He's part Percheron. There was
Beautiful.
nothing refined about him. He was kind of heavy, but he had the most amazing gaits. Nice walk, a jog that I could sit to all day. and he could trot out, but he had a canter, just a rocking horse canter that was really great. Yeah, fell in love with him, taught him tricks, took him to horse shows. We won some ribbons and trophies, and I had him, I had him until almost until he died.
Wow. So what style of riding did you do mostly? Excuse me.
I learned to ride English, and I was taught that that was the only way to ride. And of course, my mother was a very refined lady. She didn't like it when I rode Western, but I did have Western tack, and I liked to take Jet to horse shows. He wasn't a jumper. I couldn't put him in hunter classes or jumping classes. So I would ride him in Western pleasure or English pleasure or bridle path pleasure or horsemanship classes, anything, anything that I could get into, any classes that I could get into, I entered.
That's great. Yeah, it sounds like my upbringing when I was in the AQHA shows. We had lots of different things that we did with the horses.
Hmm.
So, really, when you were introduced to horses, was the probably the late 1940s? Is that right?
Well, let's see, 30, 40. Yes, probably. Yeah, late 40s.
Yeah. Okay, so you've seen obviously lots of changes in the horse world. What are some of the biggest changes you've seen?
Well, probably the fact that my parents didn't have a lot of money, so we never actually bought a horse. They're given to you. If people know that you take good care of a horse, will give their horse a good home. I mean, people line up to give you their horses.
Yeah.
Um, so my horses were never expensive horses. Um, they were just grade horses, like the equivalent of a mutt in a dog. A lot of different breeds represented. In fact, Jet was part Percheron, so he was on the heavier side. But back then, you could compete in horse shows with a horse that didn't cost $100,000 or $200,000.
Right.
As long as as long as you trained your horse and you rode well, and he was well schooled and you knew what you were doing as far as the requirements of that particular class, you could enter any horse. Nowadays, it's a little bit different. I go to horse shows and I'm amazed at the quality of the animals that even little children are riding.
Yeah. Yes, it's such a big difference now. And as we were talking about before, such specialization in the horse world these days. And whereas we did everything, showed quarter horses and did everything from halter to barrels at night. Everything is pretty specialized now, and
That
it's kind of a different way of showing and having horses.
it is. Well, in the winter, sometimes we go down and visit our son who lives in Florida, and he's very near Wellington, where this huge international horse show. It's called the Winter Equestrian Festival.
Right.
We usually manage to stop by there in the winter, and I'm just blown away at the quality of the horses and riders.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, I think my highest quality horse that I had was about $2,500, and now I mean there's over 200,000. It's kind of amazing.
well, when our children came along, and I did get back into horses, my father and my husband built a lovely stable. Um, I had a horse that my first horse after after the kids came along, we did buy for $200, and that included a nice Western saddle and a nice English saddle, and
Wow.
this lovely chestnut mare who was a perfect family horse. So for $200, I had the works.
That's yeah, that's a good bargain.
Yeah, I thought.
Yeah, I want to bring up Stacy Swaim's comment. She's asking, Peggy, have you ever been to horse races and rodeos?
As a child, we went to a rodeo. I remember being appalled. I was impressed at the quality of the riding, but I just thought that the animals didn't have a very good life. Um, I guess I just felt sorry for them. Horse races, yeah, I've been to a lot of horse races.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Now, so let's transition over to your book because that's what we're here to talk about. And I want to talk about a couple of different sections in the book: Paradise Found and Religion and Horses. So, talk a little bit about that as we get into your book, because those have a lot to do with horses, right?
Exactly. Well, my family was kind of religious. Our church was very important in our lives, and we spent several days a week at church for various reasons. And then one Sunday, this couple appeared, and they had a farm, lived nearby, and me to ride, invited me to their farm, and I ended up riding Chico, and um, that was my first exposure. Actually, it didn't end well because after a couple of years, the family had a lot of personal problems, and my parents wouldn't let me go anymore to their house, to their farm.
That's too bad.
Yeah, it was too bad. But then a couple of years later, when my father saw that I was a teenager and might be interested in boys, he decided that horses might be the lesser of two evils. So he introduced me to an old friend of his who had horses. His name was Bill, and I tell about him in the book briefly. But Bill had a horse named Jet. That's where I met Jet. And so I rode at Bill's and I did stable work and grooming and mucked stalls. And it was my life. I loved it.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I've been showing a picture of the book on there, but I actually went out and bought it yesterday. Started reading. You can see where I've bookmarked some of my things that I'm reading there. Um, so basically, the name of the book is About My Mother: True Stories of a Horse Crazy Daughter and Her Baseball Obsessed Mother. So tell us how you came up with the idea of this book and how it just started. How you started writing this.
I've been writing for years. I've been writing for newspapers and magazines, essays, human interest stories, humor. I'm really into humor. So,
And you're funny.
well, that's good. And I noticed that whenever I wrote stories about my mother, they were so well received. People loved the stories. And I wrote a lot of stories for the Baltimore Sun, and the Baltimore Sun will not put one of your stories in their paper unless you give them your email. So after I would put a story in the paper, I would receive this barrage of emails. And without exception, people loved the stories about my mother. They could relate. And I think that's why the book is popular.
Mhm.
People would say to me, "Oh, she sounds like my mother. That's exactly how my mother behaved." Or, "Oh, my mother did this all the time." And so I thought, well, if people are hungry for these kind of stories, then I can put them into a book because I have a lot of stories about my mother, even some that didn't quite make the book.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're totally right about that. That it's so relatable, and when we talked yesterday, we ended up talking for about a couple of hours, and I felt like I'd known you forever.
Yeah.
Um, there's so many things that we have in common, and even like with your son Mike, like he tells people stories, I tell people stories. We have strong faith, and the horses, and my grandmother used to live next door to my mom's youngest sister, and so that whole thing, I was like, I can totally identify with that. And I think you're also right that people want to hear things that make them feel good. They want to laugh and remember when times might have been better than they are now. So I think that's really why it's taken off. And it has taken off. It's a bestseller, is it not?
It is. It's on the New York Times best-selling books list, and it's on Wall Street Journal and another newspaper. Of course, it won't come to me right now, but yes, we're very happy. It's it's being quite popular, and that's exciting.
Yes. And this is the second printing.
It's on the second printing, and they're looking at a third, so
Wow.
it
And
might.
so do you know how many total numbers of books have been sold?
No, I don't.
Okay. But the first one was about 10,000, and it's probably a lot more now.
Well, the first one we self-published because publishers were not interested in my book because they said it was really good. but nobody ever heard of my mother, and nobody heard of me. So Mike said, well, I've read it. It's a good book. I'll publish it. So he and Microworks published the book. They printed 10,000 copies, and they sold in weeks,
Wow.
which really got the attention of big publishing houses, and they came calling, and they made offers, and so we went with Forefront Books. Jonathan Merck is the publisher, and Simon and Schuster does all of the distribution of the book. So they work together.
That's awesome. So somebody's asking something here. Let me pull this up in just a second. Let me find it. This is Wendy Bryan. She says, did your mom ever read any stories about herself you wrote? And if I can't read that, did they like them?
She did. I wrote a story about her and her obsession with baseball and sold it to Guidepost magazine. And I gave it to her when it came out. She loved it.
That's awesome.
She lived in a senior care center called Oakcrest, and she had one of those scooters, a Rascal scooter. Actually, there's a story in my book called The Rascal Scooter in the second printing. And my mother would drive the halls of Oakcrest with Guidepost magazine in her basket. And I'm sure she stopped people and showed them that story all the time. Made me feel good that she liked the story, but she felt so proud.
Now growing up, I assume you had a good relationship with her, but it might have been where you butted heads a little bit. Is that right?
It was very strained. My mother was determined that her two daughters would be refined young ladies. Well, I wasn't. My sister was. She was happy with my sister, but when I galloped through the neighborhood or pitched manure or whatever, that did not please my mother. She wanted more for me. But in, 1954, when the Baltimore Orioles came to town, my mother, that refined woman who loved opera, she loved the ballet, she played contract bridge. She was just an all-round lady. She dressed well. Her home always was beautiful. That all went out the window, and my mother became this horse-obsessed, horse-crazed woman who jumped up and down and yelled and threw things at the TV and shouted obscenities at umpires. She just did a complete about face.
Yeah. So she loved baseball.
Oh my goodness. She was an Orioles fan from sunup to sundown.
Wow. So that changed your life a little bit. I read a passage where your dad had talked to you about how she had changed and how you were going to deal with that. Talk about that for a minute.
Well, he wanted me to be patient with my mother, and he said, after all, she has supported your love of horses. As I got older, when I reached 15 and we moved to the farm, I just lived in the barn practically, and my mother was very supportive. She understood that. She didn't ask me to do housework or cooking or cleaning, and she allowed me to pretty much live my passion. So my father reminded me of that, and he said, and she even goes to your horse shows on Sundays. So I think you could be a little more understanding of her passion. So I tried, and I think I was.
It seems like yourself and your parents were just very calm and wise people. Would you say that?
I think I'm very fortunate to have the parents I had. They just couldn't have been any better. Now, I might not have said that about my mother growing up because we did have opposite interests. But as I've gotten older, I realized that she was the best.
Yeah, and that may have translated into your own marriage. You've been married for over 50 years. Is that right?
Yeah, we have. Oh, 58 actually. We just had an anniversary last week.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. Yeah, 58 years. Yeah, we do have a good marriage. We're
That's,
very fortunate.
let's see, I've got a comment here from Stephanie Phipps. My favorite story is about her ability to recreate fashions and become a successful working woman.
Yeah.
What is that about?
Well, my mother was a homemaker until I reached my teens, and then she decided, she wanted more. She needed more stimulation. She needed to reach out and stretch, spread her wings and stretch. She needed to do things she hadn't done before, so she got a job at a local department store, an upscale department store called Hutzler's. And she wanted to better herself, and she wanted to be a supervisor because my mother was a take charge person, always in charge. But they told her without a college education she couldn't do that. So she moved on. But yeah, she was into fashion. Oh, and she was a seamstress. She made her own clothes. She made everything my sister and I wore growing up. She was very accomplished
That's great.
with her sewing machine.
Yeah, my mom did too. She
Oh,
made our show clothes for the horse shows.
yes, yeah. My mother
Yeah.
made me a beautiful shirt to wear, a rat catcher shirt. Um, and you know what else she did? She crocheted me a beautiful saddle blanket
Really?
to use with my Western saddle. It was blue and white striped, and it was just lovely. And she made me some saddle pads to use with my English saddle. They were like quilted, the white quilted that were the shape of the saddle,
Right.
and they were really nice. She made me 5 or 6 of those.
That's great. All right, I have got another comment here from Wendy Bryan. Peggy, was your mom from the South? I asked because swearing at football games and all that is completely allowed here, even for the most refined ladies. I'm not sure what that means, but was she from the South because she swore at football games?
My mother was from the South. Yeah, she was born in a little town called Fleeton, Virginia. It was a fishing village. And she lived there until she was 20 and moved to Baltimore to become a governess.
Wow.
But I think I know what Wendy's referring to there because I have seen football games. Um, the South is really big into football, apparently, and women
Yes.
are quite demonstrative. Yeah, and they're quite the fan. Yeah.
Yes, they are. Now, I also wanted to ask you about your writing that you did in some horse journals, Horse and Rider, Young Rider, Equine Journal. How did you get into doing that? Did you just happen to send in an article and say, "Here, take a look," or did they ask you to do that, or what happened?
I was very fortunate. I had a couple of friends. There were 3 of us, and we had kind of a critique group, a writing critique group. We would write stories and get together. I don't know, it was once a week or a couple of times a month. We would share what we had written. We would read each other's work, and then we would critique it. Well, one of the girls had gone to writers conference, and picked up a copy of Horse and Rider. And she said that she had read some articles, and she said, you are so informed about horses. I think you could write articles for this magazine. So I did, and they bought it. So then I wrote another one, and then I came upon Young Rider. Well, Young Rider would buy 1,000-word stories, fictional stories. And so I wrote for Young Rider for several years. And then Equine Journal, at the end of the book, they had a segment called Last Laugh, and it was a humor story. So, I mean, horses and humor just spoke to me.
Yeah,
I started writing for them, and
that's
it was great fun.
yeah. So are you naturally funny? I mean, did you practice this over the years? You just were born funny.
No, I don't think so. I don't think I found my funny until um, I really don't remember writing humorous stuff until around 2000, 2001. Uh-huh.
Okay.
And I do love humor, and I love humor writers. Read a lot of humor.
Now,
So yeah, it's part of my life.
now, when you write, does it just come out and it's kind of in the final form, or do you have to go back and edit and edit?
Oh, you're never finished. Writers are never finished. In fact, I could read articles that I've written years ago, and I'll say to myself, "Oh, I could have said it better. Why didn't I say it like this?" And people tell me, I know a lot of writers, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I'll go into a bookstore and I'll see my book on the shelf, and I'll pick it up and I'll say, oh, I could have done a better job here. Oh, why didn't I say it this way?" So you never really finished. I forgot what your original question was.
Well, I think I did as well. Let's move on to the next one then.
We're a good pair.
Yes. Um, Now, it's kind of well known that Mike has been your son has been trying to drag you into, the modern world, technology, and all that sort of stuff for quite a while. So you're finally here, kicking and screaming, I believe, is what they said. And what is your take on social media? And, you've got, over 77,000 followers on your page. Does that blow your mind? And, is that a good way to sell your book? What do you think about all that?
85, but who's counting?
85. Wow.
I'm not counting. Well, listen, 3 months ago, I didn't know anything about Facebook. And Mike and his people said, you really should get into social media if you're going to write a book. People will get to know you. They'll get to know your writing style. You should write a blog. And if people like your blog, then they'll say, well, I like her blog. Maybe I'll like her book. So I did start writing a blog a few months ago. I didn't know anything about it. It was very difficult, and I still don't know my way around Facebook. And you know how limited I am technologically speaking. After yesterday, trying to get me hooked up with this.
I think you know a lot now.
Well, I'm a little smarter than I was this time yesterday, but I only had one way to go. So every day or every other day, I do write a blog, and it's gotten much easier. Material just falls from the sky. I'm married to a man who is very funny, and there's just humor everywhere you look. In fact, my husband said, I'm afraid people are going to stop talking to you because they're going to be afraid you're going to write about them. I've written about my doctor, my dentist, my hairdresser. I mean, you name them, I've written about them. The storekeeper, I've written about just everybody who comes into my life becomes material.
That's great.
And I think people like it because they can relate,
Yeah, exactly.
I wrote a story. I was having trouble getting in touch with Mike. He wasn't returning my call or my email. He just is so busy. And so I wrote him a story about something that happened in my life. I lost my blue purse, and I left it dangling from the handle of a cart in the Walmart parking lot. And I wanted to tell my children. So I told two of them, and then Mike wasn't around. So I wrote him a story about losing my blue purse in the Walmart parking lot. Well, he just thought it was so funny. He posted it. Well, it went viral. And, excuse me, over 100 million people have seen the story.
Wow.
Well, his take on that was that it's cough drop time. His take on that was that people could relate. Everybody's been to a Walmart. Everybody's lost something valuable in their life. So after that, he said, Mom, why don't you write me the occasional story and I will read it as a video. And people, and if this book of yours ever does materialize, then people will know they like your style of writing. So I did, and he would read the stories and they were well received. And then one day, my husband went out for a walk on a hot summer day, and I was worried about him, so I texted Mike. And it was a humorous text. It was probably 80 words. Something to the effect of, your father's out walking and it's 93 degrees. He won't listen to me. So I told him to make sure he has ID so that when he falls down and is carted off to the hospital, they can give me a call. Well, people read it and they liked it. So Mike said, send me the occasional text. So I've written dozens of
Yes.
texts and stories. And so
But
my next book, one section of my next book will probably be comprised of texts and stories
yes.
I've written.
Yeah. Now you very delicately talked about that text. But what is funny about it, and I'll tell people right now, if you don't mind,
I don't mind.
is that she had said something about him being passed out, prostrate on the ground, and it came across to him as what? Prostate.
Well, I'll tell you, I dictated it and I didn't proof it. It was filled with typos. In fact, I think the first sentence was, Mike, your father out walking in 93 degree. It was just filled with typos. So when I got to the part about falling down, I said, oh, I know. John said, oh, I said, your father's wearing sunglasses because he says they make him look sexy. So I reminded him that I meant to say prostrate. I thought I did. Lying prostate on the sidewalk. There's nothing sexy about lying prostate on the sidewalk. Well, people thought I meant his prostate was lying on the sidewalk. So it was very humorous.
Yeah. I watched that, I think either last night or this morning, and I just could not stop laughing. I've been laughing for the last 48 hours.
So,
Thank you.
and you certainly are welcome.
All right. So I was going to ask you about that. So I'm glad you talked about that. And then explain the Mike's little Facebook friends comment. What does that mean?
Well, in one of my communications to him, I referred to his readers. In fact, I think it was the Blue Purse, Old Blue. I referred to his readers as, I said, I realize you're very busy with your little Facebook friends. Well, that just took off. So now his followers are known as his little Facebook friends. And now I have little Facebook friends.
That's right. You got your own little Facebook friend.
Do, and they're wonderful. I did a presentation at the local library last Sunday, the 18th. And one of my questions, I began by asking if there were any of my little Facebook friends in the audience, and quite a few hands went up. It made me feel like I was among friends. It was very nice.
That's awesome. So the other thing I want to bring up is that they're calling you an industry disruptor in the book publishing industry because I guess because you went about it an independent way and you've done so well. So talk about that a little bit. How have you disrupted the publishing industry?
Well, I think, as you said before, I mean, the usual way that someone gets published is to write something, they send it to a publishing house and hope that it will be read. Unfortunately, I know so many writers who are so good and their work will never ever be seen, will never even be read by a publisher because they receive so much material. It goes into a slush pile and is just never read. It's a sad reality. I didn't do it this way. Instead, my son published it. Listen, I know every day how fortunate I am to have a son who was able to do that. I mean, most writers don't have that advantage. So I am very fortunate. I guess in that way, maybe I'm a disruptor. Also, I'm 80. This is my first book.
Yeah.
And I've discovered a new definition for optimism. A publisher, I was in a very fortunate position of kind of interviewing publishers because several of them wanted my book. one publisher, and I decided this is the perfect definition of optimism, offered me at the age of 80 a 3-book deal. I'm thinking, well, it took me 80 years to write the first book. Do you really think I'm going to have 3 books?
I think you are.
I might, I don't know, but I thought she was very optimistic to even suggest it.
Yeah. So I mean, is that coming up? Will we see a second book coming out soon?
I don't know when, but yes, there will be
Yes.
a second book. Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Well, we had started on American Horse Talk, or we're going to start in January, a book club. So we would love to talk about your book, probably starting in either February or March. Would that be okay with you?
Oh, I would love it. I would
And,
love
and would you pop in from time to time and
Yeah.
talk to us?
And if you talk me through it, if you
Okay.
tell me how to get in there again, I'll
Okay.
do it.
Definitely.
And
All right.
at the end of the book, I have a daughter-in-law who's a teacher. She taught for years and now she's an administrator. And when she read my book or my manuscript, she said, "Mom, I really love it, but you need some questions in here for book groups, study groups, some study questions."
Right.
So I said, "Well, write them." So she wrote them, and they're excellent,
Oh, good.
really great, for book groups.
That's great. All right. Well, I have another question. Let's see. From Rebecca McGee. Let me show this. I love the story about your mom and the talent show. It is hilarious. Did your mom sing often when you were growing up?
Oh my goodness, she sang in church and always embarrassed the heck out of me. I was usually seated next to her, and she had a nice alto voice. However, she was really almost always flat. She was never really in tune. So no, she never sang by herself. And in the talent show, she didn't sing, she lip synced. So she just, the record was playing in the back
Right.
and she strutted around the stage, embarrassing me.
Now, do you sing?
I have a voice for a choir. I can blend. I read music and I'm usually on the right note, but I don't have a voice, a solo voice. No.
Mm-hmm.
My
Yeah,
voice,
I was in the choir as well.
well, I'm only in the choir because my choir is desperate for an alto. And I do read music, but no, nobody would want to listen to me sing.
and, and you play the piano as well, right?
Well, I play the piano like I sing. I had years of piano lessons. I squandered them. I didn't practice. I mean, much to my mother's chagrin. So I do play. I love to play. I play for myself. I'm kind of a closeted player, although the minister did ask me the other day if I would accompany the congregation or the group that comes to the Sunday night suppers, if I would accompany them during the Advent season. So I can play well enough to do that, but I don't what you call play well.
What was your favorite song that you play?
Hmm. Um. Oh gosh, I can sing it. I can't remember the title. I can't remember the title.
Well, we'll get you next time on that one.
Let It'll come to me like 2 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. Well, it might come to you before the end of the interview.
Maybe.
We're almost done. I did want to talk about why do you think this book is so important to people? We kind of mentioned that, about the happiness and everything, but for you, why do you think it's so important to people?
Let There Be Peace on Earth is the name of the song that I play.
Okay.
It's my favorite. I think my book is important because people seem hungry for something that makes you feel good, that makes them feel good. In this time of, oh dear, you have only to turn on the news to see such unhappiness, and everybody is so quarrelsome and negative and critical. There's none of that in my book. It's a feel-good book. I think that's one reason people like it. Another reason is that as I said before, it's relatable. Everybody had a mother, and many of mothers have children of their own or have daughters of their own. Most people are part of a family, and this is a family story. So people can relate to it, and it will make them feel good. Although people have told me that they cry also. They've,
Yes.
in a couple of places, they're very poignant, and it will make you cry.
Yes. Happy, sad, for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly.
Yes. So I'm showing the cover of the book now. Again, it's about my mother. It's by Peggy Rowe. And the forward is by her son, Mike Rowe. That's an interesting section as well.
I happen to have one here too. Look.
Yeah, there you go.
What
Oh,
are,
we should all show our books.
yeah, what are the chances of this?
Hey, look at that. I can't do the reverse. I don't know which way I am in the camera.
Oh, well, I saw it.
So it is at aboutmymotherbook.com. That's the website. You can go to her Facebook page. That's About My Mother, correct, Peggy?
It's called aboutmymotherbook.com.
Okay, and then your Facebook is About My Mother, just plain About My Mother?
Oh, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, if they want
Okay.
to follow my blog, they would just bring up About My Mother Facebook. Yeah.
Okay.
I also have another page on there. Somebody else set it up for me, and it's under Peggy Rowe. And I go on there occasionally. And then apparently I have a little fan club, and they have a page also.
Yes. Someone had mentioned you have almost 10,000 members on that as well.
Yes, I go there from time to time. And
that's awesome.
Right.
Well, Peggy, you're such an inspiration to me. And I don't know if I said it during this broadcast, but we said earlier that, I enjoy writing. I probably don't get to spend as much time writing as I'd like to, but I've always loved it. And you're inspiring to me because, basically you're never too late to be an author. It's never too late. And,
True.
you can be a good writer, you can be a good storyteller, but you're both. And it's just really impressive to me and inspiring. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for saying that. This has been such fun. I do love to talk about horses.
Yes. So you can come back anytime. Pop into that book club group, and we'd love to see you.
Okay. I look forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And guys, thank you for watching, and for all the people making the comments here. We really appreciate you doing that. If you would take a quick minute after this to share it to all your horse friends, we'd appreciate that. Make sure you go to Peggy's group and or her Facebook page and like that. And make sure you go to American Horse Talk page to join there and to like it so you can get our updates, and go to American Horse Talk group to join and help us share love of country and love of horse. Thanks so much, Peggy.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.
You too.
I hope you feel better too.
Oh, I will. And you too.
All right. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.